Lena, about to go live, okay?
Hi, Rosie.
Hello. How are you?
Good. We are live already, and we are awaiting people to enter, and then it'll be live streamed and ready to put on our Students in VR website so that teachers can access it later on and learn more about what you do for their aspiring students. So we're just going to wait a few more minutes.
All right, Angelina?
Yes.
I'm going to just add 1 or 2 effects and then leave.
Okay.
And then you're good to go. Where are we?
Rosie, when you came in, did you see the other options of Students in VR?
No, what was there?
We're just we have a spaceman now in the background. Some people may be going to the one of the other talk hasn't quite finished yet, so people may be coming in a little bit later. So if you had picked that other talk, it was still going.
I see. No
so
worries.
we're gonna start in a few minutes, and then hopefully the other talk will wrap up and people will come over. I know there's a few other people getting in headset here. As soon as Daniel puts our little
rocket there as well.
The one this morning was so lovely with the little fairies flying around.
Yeah, it really was, and the mushrooms.
Hello.
Hi, Metra. Hi, Chris.
How are you all? Let's see. How's the seated working on here? Okay.
All right, I'll leave you to it, Angelina.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel, for all your help
later.
as always.
Yeah, no problem.
Bye. Oh, wow. And look at in the background.
I'm actually just gonna, before I leave, Angelina, when I leave, I hope everything I've put in here stays. If it disappears, we'll just go back to the black canvas. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Can everybody still see it? Okay, we are going to start here in just a moment. I wanted to let everybody know that the other talk has kind of gone over and they're trying to wrap it up. So even though people will start coming in, we're going to start because it's being live streamed, and then it's actually going to be curated as part of content for teachers for later on. We all got into this field because we're creative and we're kind of risk takers, and there's some things that we're learning as we go along today for this conference. It's student-led, so students are learning, and we're going to get there, right? Can everybody in the audience please mute themselves? And Andrew, you'll be doing the volumetric recording, and then we're going to start now. So. Oh, he needs host privileges. 2 seconds, guys. And I'm going to give Andrew some host privileges. You should have it now. And then I took it off immediately after that. So, do you have it now? Okay, so I gave you host privileges and I'm so sorry, Rosie. We're
No,
all
don't worry about it, honestly.
learning every
It's
time
fine.
we do this. Andrew, if you can come over here because I want you to get in headset and so I can show you actually do. And I'm gonna mute myself real fast. Okay, guys, yay! We're actually gonna start now. Rosie, thank you so much for being part of Students in VR. Students VR is a part of Educators in VR, and it is sponsored by the American Indian Resource Center. And today we are focusing on ways of expressing ourselves through language and through art. And so one of our two keynotes today is Rosie Summers. She was part of the earlier talk. She was a surprise guest.
Yes.
And so Rosie is a 3D animator, a virtual reality artist, and a tilt brush artist. And I wanted to start out just by letting you talk a little bit more about what you do and how you tell young students how to become what you are. Because this morning, Yasmin is your biggest fan. She is an aspiring artist. And so when you explain to students, because students will be watching this feed in their classrooms with teachers in the fall, or maybe not in classrooms, maybe at home, because we won't have classrooms in the fall, how would you explain what you do and how somebody who wants to become a virtual artist becomes you?
Yeah, so basically, I create art in space. So instead of a canvas, I've ditched the canvas for space around me. Instead of traditional paints and palettes, I use my controllers in my hands just right now. And with these, with the palette and with the space, you can create characters, you can create worlds in a whole other dimension. It's a completely different way of working because you're no longer confined to just, a slab or a canvas in front of you. You have this whole world that you can bring your imagination to life in, which is why it's perfect for children, because children spend half the time being told off for drawing on walls. Whereas in virtual space, they can make as much mess, they can really bring their imaginations to life exactly how they envisage them. Quite a bit of interference there.
Okay. In the audience, everybody in the audience can mute themselves. That would be great. Thank you guys so much. Go on, Rosie.
Yeah. So and I'm a 3D animator in the games industry as well. So day by day, I'm bringing characters to life through motion in the way I animate things. And this is for games. Like last year, we just released a title called Angry Birds Movie 2 Under Pressure VR for PSVR, which was fantastic to work on because I was bringing to life little piggies and from the Angry Birds universe. It was such fun to work on. And oh, let's get a feedback again. And yeah, so that's what I do, and it means a lot to inspire other people, especially a young generation, who can take up this medium, work with it, mold with it, and turn it into something amazing.
So if I was a young student and I said, I want to do what Rosie does, how did you come to do what you do? And what would you suggest to a young artist who wants to get into immersive media?
Yeah, so I took a traditional path at first. I was a fine artist for many years, painting on canvas with oils and stuff like that. And then I sort of got bored of that and wanted to take things into a more virtual world. I wanted to start to tell stories from the inside out and immerse people inside my narratives instead of just showing them a screen. Instead, they can actually be inside the world. So that's when I studied animation. So I studied animation for 3 years, And that's how I found VR, was that new way of telling stories. And yeah, so that's my path, was from being a traditional artist, and then I found VR as this really powerful medium to bring a new dimension to the way I create artwork and tell stories. And then that's it. I was in the virtual world and haven't looked back since. So that's the path I took. But loads of other people have taken completely different paths. A lot of people have come from a science background, because VR is very much like a collision of science and art. You know, it's very techie, but not that techie that you can't get into it. Like, because I'm not techie, and I have picked up VR and been able to work in VR. It's a medium available to everybody. So yeah, that's my path, and having those art skills that you've learned at school, and then you take those into the virtual world and they translate really well. It sometimes takes people a while to get used to the 3D-ness aspect of it, especially if you've not done 3D art before, because a lot of people just draw flat and then look around and then realize it's just floating in space. It's not got any substance to it. So that takes a lot of people to understand, is that 3D translation. But if you come from a 3D background, then it's an almost fluid transition into the virtual space, really.
Yeah, the world is 3D. I think Steve Banbury and Yasmin today were talking about how children are much better artists because they haven't conditioned themselves to a 2D medium. They live in a 3D medium, and that's what they see. And Yasmin seems to have a non-traditional path to becoming a 3D artist. And so you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about, which is a lot of young artists consider themselves not techie.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a blurring. I often say that the line between student and teacher is being blurred, but the line between artist and technologist is being blurred. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, especially what you would tell somebody who's a young artist that says, well, I do art, but I could never do technology, because you do both.
Yeah. I get this all the time. People asking, I really want to get into VR, but I don't know anything about coding. I'm not a developer. Is it possible for me to get involved with it? And yes, it's a really creative medium. Absolutely. So you do have that crossover from like science and art, but they collide, and it's really easy as an artist to get into such a platform, even though you quite often don't expect it, because it does seem like you're going to have to, especially to make experiences. People are like, but I can't code, I'm not a game developer. It doesn't matter. There are platforms available, toolkits in games, games engines that enable you to create experiences without code. It's just dragging and dropping some boxes, like VRTK, for example. You can really bring to life these experiences without any coding knowledge at all. So it actually is it is a very accessible medium to get into at entry level, which people just don't seem to understand.
So sometimes people ask me what I do for a living, and I say, well, I'm not a fireman, I'm not a postman, I'm not a doctor. And it's very easy in our minds to say, well, I know what a doctor is and I know what a doctor does. But explaining us as emerging technologists, it's hard for them to conceive of possibilities that they don't see reflected. And so what do you suggest, or what have you found is very useful for people to understand the possibilities in what you do? Because like you said, there's kind of a bridge, like, I think I can't do that, but I only think that because I don't know what that is. I didn't know it was a possibility to do that thing. So when you're explaining to youth, what do you suggest they do to find out more about the possibilities of becoming someone like you?
Yeah, the biggest suggestion I usually say, and it's what how I learned about this really, is just by putting a headset on and playing in Tilt Brush, and you just spending hours and hours just playing around. And at first your creations are just like neon nightmares, really. They're not got any substance. It's just you playing with all the brushes, seeing what every brush does. And in that process of learning to use this tool, you're coming up with ideas, you're coming up with concepts on how you can use it, and bit by bit you're developing as this VR artist. And that's that's always the first thing I do with someone who wants to learn more about VR. I say just go in tilt brush, and they start to, even if they're not an artist, they start to visualize ways in which they could use the immersivity of this medium to get across their ideas, their concepts in an effective way. And then also I suggest tutorials as well. There are quite a few tutorials available online from artists such as the Sabby Life, which are fantastic for people who like to take a more methodical approach. So they like to have a look, observe what they can do, and then and then start acting it out and elaborating on it. So that'd be my biggest advice.
That's what Yasmin had said. Young artists that they somebody had asked, "Are you going to go a traditional route?" And she had said that most of the stuff comes from social media. And when we're in VR, not just in Tilt Brush, we were in AltSpace VR, and there was a young boy in there, and he says, "I want to know more about this. How do I learn more about this?" And I said, "Well, you're in a perfect place because there are 40 of us in here who do this all day, every day, a lot of different things in VR, and our partners and our husbands and our spouses and our cousins are tired of us talk about it all the time, and we would love to talk to you about it." And I find that reaching people who reach out to me can hear my story that I like to tell over and over again to not get bored.
Absolutely. Yasmin is absolutely doing a fantastic job at networking and talking to people, talking to these VR artists that have inspired her, and then asking questions. And that's how she's going to learn rapidly. Obviously, it takes a lot of confidence to do that. A lot of children might refrain from reaching out, but do, because it's fantastic, and you learn so much from just talking to these people that inspired you, learning techniques and asking questions, because that's the best way you're going to learn, really.
And I think you would agree with me. Would you say that the virtual reality immersive experiences community is very opening and understanding, and
absolutely.
When people reach out. Now, you had mentioned playing around with brushes until you figure out what you want to create. And so one of the questions that students often ask is, how do I know what I'm supposed to paint? Or traditional schooling tells us this is what you're supposed to do, exactly this. And then when children are given the ability to scribble on the wall, they don't really know what to do. So my question for you is, how do you come up with the ideas? And then how can we help students connect with that creativity that sometimes we kind of stomp out of them? We want them to do things a certain way in public schooling. So how do you
that's such a good question. That is a really, really good question, because it's so true. When people are faced with the expanse of space, they're like, "Oh, well, what do I do?" It seems like there's too much. There's too much possibilities that sometimes children get a bit stumped and think, "Oh God, I don't know what to do." So when I've done workshops and demos and stuff, children usually just play around, and then it's after playing around that they think, "Hang on, I'm going to make a house, or I'm going to make this campfire in this forest." A lot of their ideas actually come from once they've started using the tools. But to me, the things that inspire me the most are what inspires me day in, day out. So I often bring my passions into the virtual world. So at the minute, I'm really passionate about space. So I'm drawing lots of space inside VR. And you can take images inside from Google, and then you can start drawing from those images. But yeah, so it's really, there is a great way that you can translate what your passions are into the virtual space. Yeah, sort of lost my train of thought after the interruption.
Well, one of the I'm gonna tap into something you said there. You said once they start to play, and I think that play is such an important part of learning. And can you give some examples of maybe events you've been in, or teaching that you've seen that incorporate that play component, that maybe teachers who are watching this feed later on can think about when they're starting to build their curriculum, and the importance of play, like you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I've seen quite a lot of workshops. One of them, which I was really delighted to be a part of, was this workshop where we created like a virtual sculpture park. So the children were encouraged to just play with tilt brush for a long time, and then it's through that process they realized what sculptures they wanted to bring to the park and what ideas the idea they wanted to sort of bring to life in virtual space. So we really encouraged the play element. We even included Play-Doh, so the children could get a feel for their sculpture design in 3D in the physical world before translating it into VR. And they took pictures of the sculptures into tilt brush and then worked from them and created some really, really amazing sculptures. So you can sort of you can mix physical elements with virtual elements as well in order to get that that cohesive learning about the 3D and virtual space. And then there's I've quite a few workshops I've done similar where children have started to create the items that would go in an Egyptian tomb. So there was like a big pyramid, and then the children go inside, and then they start to add elements into the tomb. So you can really incorporate educational elements there as well, because they're learning about history as they're making this artwork. And then a lot of workshops just based around playing in tilt brush and literally just having 20 minutes of running around this virtual world, throwing out particles, neon paint and stuff like that, really decorating these worlds. And then within like 10 minutes, they've got rid of all this. They've got rid of all the mess and the neon learning. And instead, they've started to transform it into something that they really want to make. So they're starting to make, like I said earlier, like these houses and snowmen and building snowmen and stuff like that. The rate at which they learn the tool is amazing, because quite a lot of workshops are done with adults, and they would stick inside this neon nightmare for the whole 20 minutes. But children, they start to ask questions. They start to ask, well, how do I delete what I've done here? How do I then start to move on to making something, actually proper that they want to take home at the end? And it's truly amazing. It really is really rewarding as well.
And those asking of questions is the owning of their learning, right? There's something I want to do, and therefore I seek out the answers. And you had said that playing at first. Now, how do I clean up? I'm going to clean up this mess. It reminds me of when we were released for recess in elementary school. The first 5 minutes was us kind of yelling and running aimlessly to the playground, and then somebody would say, "You know what? We should play. We should play Titanic." Or we should play Cops and Robbers, or we should play. Yeah. But the first 5 minutes was just chaos. So I want to touch on one more thing, and then we'll do question and answer. And then, in fact, right after this, there'll be another talk starting right after this. So I want to give people enough time to migrate over to the next talk. But the one thing that you said that I think is important to expound upon, especially for teachers and students that might be watching this feed, is that virtual and in real life are not mutually exclusive, that you mix the two, that you can play in Play-Doh and then get into tilt brush. Yeah. And can you talk briefly about how they're not mutually exclusive and what that does for the creative process? To see them as not mutually exclusive, either in the work that you do or in the ways that you've set up activities, or just how you experience it as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely new, different way of working. For the first time, you're actually working from inside the world and building things from the inside out. You're adding a whole new dimension to the way you work. So that's how it's completely different and how it's completely revolutionary. And with how unique it is, it does inspire children, and they start to think of, the possibilities of using this medium, because it's something completely different. Just drawing in the space around you, and then zooming inside, interacting with it like never before. It's absolutely amazing.
And so, if I have a kid using Play-Doh first, how does that help? Like in real life, how does that help them translate into virtual world? And then have you seen yourself or people be in a virtual world and then come out and use real life art supplies differently? Does it spark creativity in mediums?
Yes, that's so true. With the Play-Doh, what it does is is help with that transition from people who have just worked in 2D, just on paper, into 3D space, because it's if you think about it, it's really hard to get your head around when you're thinking of all you've dealt with is just flat medium, and then you suddenly your paper gets thrown up in the air, and then it's all your scribbles and everything is around you instead. So that Play-Doh is there for that transition between that, so they can look at their drawings and start to actually mold their drawings up and make them physical rather than well, make them 3D rather than flat. And then it's from that transition that they can then go into 3D space and be able to execute their ideas a lot more efficiently, because they've sort of had that transition process. And yeah, it's so true. After being in Tiltbush, children who will go back to drawing and painting, one child was like, oh my God, I want to look inside it instead. So they're already, they're sort of, they've been so inspired by the virtual world that they're looking back at paper now and thinking, man, I just want to go through the paper again. It does revolutionize the way they think about things.
We have time for a couple brief questions from the audience. And so if you raise your hand, I will unmute you. And do we have any questions from anybody in the audience? If you raise your real hand or you note me in some way that you want to ask a question. Okay, we don't have anything from the audience, and it is almost good because we're gonna have if people had wanted to know more about you and what you do from watching this feed, we'll put in the YouTube your contact information. But if you want to give a little pitch on you and what you do and how to follow you, now's the time to do it.
Sure thing. So I'm on Twitter all the time, VR_Rosie, and also on Instagram, same tag at VR_Rosie. And yeah, I'm a virtual reality artist, 3D animator, and Tiltbush live performer. So I do lots of events work as well, where I perform in front of audiences and delegates in virtual space, creating artwork live. And yeah, I'm also on YouTube, same VR_Rosie. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, guys.
If a school wanted to have you, I know you're based in the UK, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, based in the UK.
If a school wanted to have you come out, do you do events? Would they be able to contact you or see you at an event, take their students to see you at an event?
Absolutely, yeah. No, feel free to contact me wherever. Just yeah, hit me up a DM on Twitter or Instagram or yeah, and look forward to hearing from you guys if you want to reach out.
Yeah, students, especially aspiring students. I want to thank everybody for coming. We have another session starting soon, and so what we'll do is I will close out this room. It'll take you back to kind of the lobby area, and I think Andrew will be spawning John's room if it's not already spawned. If you wait a moment, the next talk will a new room will spawn, and then we will be going in to see students who are actually doing art in a different way. They're recreating Cherokee villages for cultural Cherokee Nation. So we hope to see you guys there. Okay, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting the work. Rosie, you were wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good to see you all. See you later.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna close out the session now. Okay.